I stood in the aisle, in the suit that only months ago I'd thought would mark the happiest day of my life. But now, between the pale golden lights and the rows of silent chairs, I felt only one thing: the suffocation of things no one dared to speak aloud. My future bride was walking arm in arm with another man, her ex-boyfriend. They moved together, their steps uneven, as if they themselves were trying to convince themselves that this was normal. No one in the room believed it. The MC stood at the wooden podium, microphone in hand, unsure whether to speak. Everyone looked at each other, their eyes filled with confusion, incomprehension, even outrage on my behalf. But I just stood there, silently watching their every step, like an audience member rewatching a film whose ending he already knows. When they stopped in front of me, I smiled, a smile that made a few people in the front row nervously gasp. And I spoke, in a voice that was strangely calm. If she wants him to walk her down the aisle, then let them walk. It's just that today is not only about her plans. She froze. Her ex-boyfriend swallowed hard. But I didn't say any more. I didn't need to. Because everything was prepared. A silent, yet ruthless plan. No arguments. No chaos. No loud, embarrassing scene. Only the truth. Bare, sharp, and undeniable. I looked straight into the eyes of the bride. The one who had cried. Who had promised. Who had told me that the past is over. And then I left an opening line. A signal for what was about to unfold. Everything started with a seemingly harmless sentence, and will end with a scene she will never forget for the rest of her life. 3 years. 3 years of loving each other, living together, building small plans for a shared future. There were days we argued to the point where it seemed impossible to continue, and then we'd hold each other tight, as if afraid of losing the other person. She was young, sometimes impulsive, often tiring me out with her sudden changes in personality, but it was her innocence and enthusiasm that made me love her. I never thought someone like her would deliberately hurt me. Even though she sometimes acted rashly, I always believed her heart was sound and pure. But there was a shadow I always saw, always standing behind her even though we had been together for 3 years, her ex-boyfriend. They were together for 7 years. 7 years of youth. 7 years of memories. 7 years she always described with words that were both distant and familiar. She often referred to him as my older brother, the person who helped me through a lot when I was young. A beautiful past that has ended. Every time she said that, I tried to believe it. Not just because I loved her, but because I believed everyone has a past, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a threat. But belief is sometimes not strong enough to mask intuition. And my intuition always told me, he has never left her life. The signs didn't come loudly. They came gently, like soft knocks on a door in the middle of the night. Not too loud, but enough to make me lose sleep. She maintained contact with him. Initially, it was just a few messages asking about work. Then it gradually became texts sent late at night, like, "Do you remember this place? I just walked past the spot we used to go to. You have a cat now? It's so cute." She said it was just basic courtesy between people who used to know each other. I asked gently, "Do you think that might be a bit much?" She smiled, touched my chest, and said, "You are my future. The past is just a memory now." I wanted to believe her. I tried to believe her. But the once-in-a-while calls became more frequent. Sometimes during her lunch break, sometimes in the evening when I was getting ready for bed. One time I heard her giggling in the living room. I walked out and asked, "Who is it?" She answered immediately, her voice unaffected. "My brother." Brother. The word she always used to make it sound harmless. But that brother was the man who had held her hand for 7 years, who had kissed her thousands of times, who had told her he loved her throughout their youth. I felt uneasy, but I stayed silent. I thought grown-up people should trust each other. But the truth was otherwise. The moment everything collapsed came unexpectedly, as light as a sentence, but as heavy as a punch. One evening, she smiled brightly and walked into the bedroom where I was reading files. She rested her hands on her hips, her voice full of excitement. "I want my ex-boyfriend to walk me down the aisle. I only see him as a brother. It would be so meaningful." The first sentence made me stop. The second sentence tightened my chest. The third sentence shattered the belief within me. I looked at her. She was still smiling. She genuinely thought that request was normal. She thought I would agree. She thought my love was so great that I could stand by and watch her walk arm in arm with her ex during one of the most sacred moments of our lives. The moment I was supposed to be the one standing beside her. I was silent for a few seconds. No anger. No shouting. I just saw one thing clearly. She no longer saw me as a true partner in her life. And I replied, in a calm voice, "Fine. If that's what you want, he can just stand there too." Her eyes lit up. "Really? You're so understanding." As for me, I just nodded. But it was not acceptance. That was the moment I started preparing for the thing that would change her life. Since that evening, I observed more closely, not because I wanted to control her, but because I wanted to know exactly what was going on. And just a few days later, I had my answer. Affectionate, ambiguous, but not vague messages. "I miss you. You're always beautiful in my eyes. If I could see you again in a wedding dress, I'd probably be very emotional." Her replies were not overly passionate, but enough to maintain the intimacy. Enough for me to know they had never truly broken up. And then I realized I didn't need to make a scene. I didn't need to fight anyone. She had made her choice. I just needed to bring that choice into the light. From that day on, I started planning, silently, like someone preparing a surprise party, but this time the gift was not what she wanted. I contacted the event staff, spoke privately with the MC, asked them to support a small segment in the program. Then, I prepared 2 wedding gifts, an old, worn-out t-shirt she used to wear during her poorer years with her ex-boyfriend, an item symbolizing that she had never truly stepped out of her past. A thick envelope containing printouts of the messages between her and her ex, to present the truth clearly, without needing another word. I didn't intend to humiliate her. I just wanted the truth to be seen by everyone, at the right time, in the right place, by the right people. And I prepared for the wedding day, in a way no bride could ever have anticipated. In the days leading up to the wedding, my future bride was so happy that her eyes constantly sparkled as if she were living in a fairy tale. Except it wasn't the fairy tale I had imagined. She boasted to her friends that I was understanding, that I was generous, and that I had accepted her past in a civilized manner. I overheard her talking on the phone. "Yes," he agreed. "Oh my God, I was so surprised. Honestly, marrying a man like him is a blessing for 3 lifetimes." That sentence echoed in my head repeatedly, not because I was happy, but because I realized she never truly understood me, and never saw me as the person she truly wanted to keep. And her ex-boyfriend? I caught a few messages he sent her, the tone ridiculously confident. He texted, "I'm happy for you, but for me to walk in with you one last time, I feel like I've won a great battle." A great battle. Yes, he viewed my wedding as a battlefield where he had just won a victory, simply because he got to lead her down the aisle. She smiled when she read that message. A smile that made me understand she enjoyed the feeling of having 2 men revolve around her. The guests began to gossip after hearing the story spread by her and her friends. Some thought I was broad-minded. Some were puzzled. Some shook their heads. No one does that at their own wedding. Something is wrong. I heard all those voices, but I didn't react. I just let everything unfold as they wished, until the day I presented the truth. The wedding hall was perfectly decorated. White flowers, golden candles, the soft sound of a piano filling the space. Everything was romantic, luxurious, yet there was a strange layer of atmosphere, as if everyone was waiting for something unusual to happen. The bride appeared, in a magnificent white dress. Her face was radiant, her lips red, her eyes sparkling with the confidence that today the world revolved around her. Beside her was the ex-boyfriend. He was adjusting his tie in the mirror, then turned to smile smugly. His eyes held the light of a person grasping something that didn't belong to him, yet believing he deserved it. They stood closer than necessary. They whispered something that immediately ceased when I walked past. I stood in a corner, calm. No jealousy, no anger, just a complete detachment, as if I were observing 2 strangers performing a play whose ending I knew well. The guests started murmuring, "Wait, why is her ex walking the bride? Does the groom know? This is odd." The atmosphere was beautiful, but strange. Romantic, yet unsettling. And that was exactly what I wanted. The music started. Everyone stood up. The bride took the ex-boyfriend's arm, confidently stepping into the aisle with a triumphant smile. The smile of someone who thought she had done something unique, something other brides wouldn't dare. The ex, needless to say, he looked at everyone with a look of victory, as if showing off that even if he couldn't marry her, He still had the right to stand beside her at the most important moment. He even held his head high, as if to etch his image into every camera. I followed behind, walking slowly, my gaze calm but ice cold. A few guests looked at me and whispered, "Why is the groom so calm? He should be angry, shouldn't he?" They didn't know that I had lost that emotion long ago. I was just waiting for the exact moment to pull the curtain down. When they reached the front, the MC stepped onto the stage. I had briefed him thoroughly. The MC smiled, holding the microphone. "And now is a special gift the groom has prepared just for the bride." The whole hall buzzed with murmurs. The bride turned to me, her eyes glistening. "What gift, dear? You prepared another surprise?" The ex-boyfriend also smiled, confident as if he were about to witness some touching moment. The staff brought up a small box, beautifully wrapped like a ring box. The bride opened it, and her smile vanished in an instant. Inside was not a ring, not a love letter, not a savings book for our future, but a torn, faded t-shirt, an old keepsake of her and her ex-boyfriend. The shirt she wore when she went out with him during their poorer, younger days. The shirt she thought she had thrown away long ago, but didn't know I had kept, as a reminder to myself. Under the shirt was a small note. For the bride who always lives in the past. The entire wedding hall fell silent. A few guests gasped. A few people burst into laughter, a sort of incredulous, surprised laugh that couldn't be held back. Her ex-boyfriend turned red, not knowing where to hide his face. He looked around as if seeking a rescue. The bride was pale. She trembled, her voice cracking. What are you doing?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her. My eyes held no anger, no blame, only a profound sense of estrangement. I took an envelope from my suit pocket and opened it in front of all the guests. Inside were screenshots of messages between her and her ex-boyfriend, dated just days before the wedding. The words went beyond the limits of friends. "I miss you so much. I wish I could still hug you. I'm emotional seeing you in a wedding dress. I wish it was me standing next to you." And her replies, "Don't say that. I don't know how to answer. Don't get too close to him. I'm afraid he'll misunderstand." Not a rejection, not a final break, just fostering hope. I finished reading, folded the envelope, and said, "You want your past to walk you down the aisle? Fine, but you won't walk into the future with me." She burst into tears, wailing like a child. "It's not like that. I only. But all the guests had witnessed everything. No one had a word left to defend her. The moment the bride burst into tears in the middle of the aisle, he did not rush over to comfort her, as everyone expected. He simply raised his hand gently, signaling to the staff behind the stage. All eyes in the ballroom focused on him, while she stammered, What else are you planning to do?" He maintained his frightening composure, his voice deep and clear. "Bring her belongings out." The service door opened. 3 staff members pushed a large cart covered with a white cloth into the room. When the cloth was pulled away, the entire audience practically held its breath. On the cart were all her personal belongings, from the high heels she wore on their first date, the designer handbags he had given her, to the expensive cosmetics she hid in the bathroom. Everything was neatly arranged, like an official moving day. The bride was stunned, covering her mouth. "No, it can't be. Are you really kicking me out? Today?" He looked at her for a long time, long enough for all her explanations to choke in her throat before she could utter them. "Today," he said slowly. "You already chose your companion." Gasps echoed through the room. Her ex-boyfriend stood next to her, his face pale, none of the pride he wore when walking into the aisle remaining. A few guests began to stand up. Some even pulled out their phones to record the unbelievable scene. The bride trembled and stepped down, trying to pick up a few items that had fallen on the floor. Her ex-boyfriend bent down to help, but just as his hand was about to touch an item, the groom, spoke in a voice as cold as steel. "He wanted to walk you down the aisle with you." He paused for a beat, his gaze sharp and cutting. "So today, let him take you back to your past." The entire hall went silent, stunned. The ex-boyfriend stood frozen, retracting his hand as if slapped. The bride sobbed, crying and shaking. "I was wrong. I just wanted to test you. I didn't think things would turn out like this," but her tears fell to the floor like drops that were far too late. Everything had spiraled out of her control. He looked at her one last time, not with anger, not with resentment, but with the finality of a man who had finally chosen to let go. And in that moment, everyone understood. This wedding ceremony was never hers to have. After that final sentence, he didn't look at her again. He turned and walked straight out of the wedding hall. There was no shouting, no chaotic scene, just a heavy silence, like a final verdict. The guests automatically parted as he walked past, forming a strange, bizarre guard of honor for a groom, leaving his own wedding. No one dared to utter a word. Their eyes held amazement, respect, and a hint of sadness. As the large doors closed behind him, the air outside was cool and clear, making him feel as if he had just escaped a suffocating room. The wind blew past, carrying the scent of grass and flowers from the nearby garden. Each thing making him realize one truth. Freedom sometimes doesn't come from gaining someone, but from letting go of the right person. That evening, in the silent apartment, he sat down and asked himself a very simple question. Do I regret it? And the answer came through clearly. I don't regret it. I lost a woman who didn't respect me to find myself again. His phone kept lighting up. Some guests texted, saying they had never seen anyone as composed and principled as him. Some even recounted that a few other guests stood up and applauded after he left, as if it were a moment of liberation for the entire ceremony. The most surprising thing was the message from the bride's mother. She only wrote 3 words. She was wrong. Combi sigh. No defense. No plea for him to return. Just a raw admission of truth. He put his phone aside, feeling a lightness in his heart. That experience taught him more than 3 years of a relationship. He concluded 3 things. Love is not the unconditional sacrifice of one's future for someone else's past. When someone places the past on the scale against the future, they have already made their choice. Boundaries are not meant to be broken, but to protect one's self-respect. Allowing them to cross a boundary once is their mistake. Allowing them to cross it a second time is your own. Silence is sometimes the most powerful answer. He didn't need to argue, didn't need to prove anything. The truth spoke for itself. Finally, he recounted the story with the composure that only those who have processed pain correctly possess. If one day someone makes you choose between them and your self-respect, choose yourself. He ended the story with a question. If it were you, would you let the ex-boyfriend walk the bride down the aisle? A question that required no answer. Because everyone, after hearing his story, surely had their own.